have meaning, right? So do you say bread and butter or butter and bread? Yes. My father in intelligence in the World War II, Alava Shalom, one of the things he knew was how to catch sometimes spies because they said butter and bread instead of bread and butter. Now, your concept about eating are not very different if you say bread and butter or butter and bread, but sometimes linguistics have a lot to say. And here I want to start with the word tzedakah and the word tzedek. What does the word tzedakah mean? What is the English word that you would propose for the word tzedakah? Can you give me, please unmute yourselves. Let's try to unmute yourself if you want to speak, and then mute yourself if you see we have a problem, and otherwise leave it because we're not a lot of people. Right. Can I have some suggestions in English for the word tzedakah?
Justice.
Justice. Who did that come from?
Caroline.
Caroline. Justice. Okay. Another suggestion for the word tzedakah as you use it. What else?
Righteousness.
Righteousness. When somebody said, I gave tzedakah, would you like to give some tzedakah? What word would you think in English?
Charity.
Charity. Okay. Now, that is the crux of the issue, right? I'm surprised that you said justice right away. You are correct, of course, because usually the word for justice that we use is not tzedakah, but one letter less.
Tzedek.
Tzedek. Okay, but you're 100% correct. In the Chumash, tzedakah is still justice, or justice, righteousness, something like that. It's almost interchangeable sometimes with tzedek. Yes, and it's certainly coming from the same root, right? And yet the word for charity is also tzedakah. What does the word in English come from? Anybody for some Greek or Latin, his background? Caritas, love, right? Tzedakah in our English terminology, in our Western terminology in general, comes from your caring, from your love for the other. In classical Jewish texts, it comes from tzedek, right? This is really very different understanding. And this is one of the things that I would like to suggest that we have to share. So let's take a look just at a couple of verses to see what we're talking about. So if we take a look at Vayera, Pashat Vayera, the book of Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 18, the beginning of Pashat Vayera, and take a look at when God says, I've got to talk to Abraham about the fact that I'm going to destroy Sodom. And what does he say? Something really very surprising. Chapter 18, verse 17. By Hashem Amar, and God said or had said, Hamachaseh ani me'Avraham asher ani oseh. Am I covering, hiding from Abraham what I'm doing? The truth is, the Almighty, most of the time, doesn't seem to confide in us. Now, verse 19. Ki yedativ, leman asher yitzaveh et banav et beito acharav, v'shamru derech Hashem la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. Leman asher avi Hashem al Avraham et asher diber alav. I want to focus on this sentence. Ki yedativ. What does that mean?
I know, or I knew.
I know about him, or I love him, depending whether the word yada means here to know or to be intimate. I know about him, or I love him, or I'm going to tell him, as in hodia, to tell. Leman asher yitzavet banav, which means either in order that or because he will command his children and his home after him, v'shamru derech Hashem, and they will keep the way of Hashem, la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. Okay, how would you translate la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat? Anybody who's got an English translation there, I'd be curious as to what you've got. What have you got for la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat?
Got to do justice and judgment.
Okay, you see the difficulty that they're having with tzedakah and mishpat?
Mm.
They put mishpat as judgment because they've already used justice for tzedakah, and they kind of, right? So you see our linguistic problem right away, right? They're not both. In Hebrew, we're using a word tzedakah, which comes from like tzedek, the tzedekitadin, it's one kind of term, and we have mishpat, which is about judging, like the word shofet, which is usually used for justice. So we have a difficulty. We don't have exactly the same terminologies in the two languages, but we have this word tzedakah, which is what we're going to do. And the reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to talk to Abraham now about Sodom is because he knows, either he's telling him in order to teach him, or he knows about Abraham, or he loves Abraham because he is going to teach his children derech Hashem la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. This is why they say that Abraham was not necessarily the first monotheist, but he was an ethical monotheist. What does it mean to be an ethical monotheist? It means to believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be ethical. That's part of how we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what we have to share. La'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. Derech Hashem is la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. What we have to share is that's how we are close to God as human beings, and that part we have to share. We don't have to share necessarily Shabbat. We can talk about it with them, but what we've demanded of us to share is the tzavot banav beito achorav v'shamru derech Hashem la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. Right? Now, we also have the word tzedek. Now, the word tzedakah also is used in the Chumash to mean almost like it was like for him a positive attribute. Take a look at chapter 15, verse 6. I'll just show you another use of the word tzedakah, which we are not going to really deal with, but it'd be interesting to see. Chapter 15, verse 6 is an example of a different use which occurs a few times with the word tzedakah. 15:6. By the way, I'm purposely asking you to look this up in the Chumash. And there are two reasons. One is, and the main one is, I want you to see these verses in context. I don't want them on a piece of paper if we can avoid that. The second is, when it's on the piece of paper, unless you're going to put it up yourself, I'm going to have to put up share screen, and I see you smaller. So if we want to feel like we all can sit and look at each other, then we can't do that with the share screen at the same time. So the first, but the more important reason is that you need to feel these verses in their context. So here is the context here. And here it says, when Abraham believes that he will have a child, and all, Vayamin b'Hashem v'reyachsheveha lo tzedakah. And he believed in God, and it was counted towards him. It was thought of for him as a tzedakah, or he thought of it as a tzedakah. It's not clear who thought about who tzedakah. Have you got any English translations there that we can compare our ideas to? What have you got there, Mel? You have to unmute.
I've got, yes. So I've got, and he believed in the Lord and he counted it to him for righteousness.
Who counted it to who? A capital H on the he counted?
Capital H on the he and a little h on the him.
Right. Okay. So he's going on that. That tzedakah there is considered as a righteous act. Yes. And we have that a number of times in Chumash with the word tzedakah as well. Okay. And there it's not about justice so much as almost like if you were in judgment, this would be one of the things put on the scale as your righteous act. I don't know if it's coming from righteousness or from the world of judgment. Now let's take a look. The word tzedek is used numerous times, and let's take a look at an example. Say in Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter in Tzedek Tidra, chapter 16. And this is just an example. There's loads of them, but let's take a look at Devarim chapter Tet Zayin, chapter 16, the beginning of Shoftim. Shoftim v'shotrim titein lecha b'chol sha'arecha Hashem Elokecha notein lecha lishvatecha v'shaftu et ha'am mishpat tzedek, and they will judge the people a judgment of tzedek, of justice or righteousness or something. Lo tateh mishpat, lo takir panim, don't favor anybody, don't move away the justice from what judgment from where it should be, don't take bribes. Verse 20, tzedek, tzedek tirdof. All right, what have you got in your English for tzedek, tzedek tirdof? Okay, Mel, what have you got?
Justice only, justice shalt thou pursue.
All right, great. So they put in that word only because of the doubling of the word tzedek. They added the word only to help us get a sense of it, and they translated tzedek as justice. Okay, so now we've got a word in the Chumash called tzedek. We've got a word in the Chumash called tzedaka, and both of those words will turn up tremendous amount later in the Nevi'im, in Tehillim, etc., in the Ketuvim in general, and there's going to be slowly moving apart of the two words. And in Chazal, there'll be more moving apart of the two words. And tzedakah comes to be used in everyday language for charity, right? For giving charity, for giving money usually. And the difference in Chazal between tzedakah and gemilut chesed is gemilut chesed might be with money or might be with an act of loving kindness that you do physically. It might be visiting the sick and they might be very rich, right? Gemilut chesed is a broader category, and tzedakah comes to mean taking care of other people, usually from finance, in a kind of way that has to do with helping them out financially, giving them money, giving them food, giving them a place to live. That's tzedakah, right? And how did this happen? And what does this mean about how we perceive tzedakah, right? And I think both perceptions, the one where tzedakah comes out of love and the one where tzedakah comes out of tzedek, are very beautiful perceptions, but they are different in a kind of way. Right, and tzedakah is coming also from the side of gemilut chesed, but it's definitely also coming from the side of tzedek. And when I've been studying this year I've been studying with a group we're studying Gemara, and I was studying with a different group. We were studying Midrashim. Well, both groups we've been looking at these concepts, and one of the women in the Midrash class suggested that tzedakah is what we do down here to achieve tzedek. Tzedek tirdof. There's an ideal, mishpat tzedek, there's an ideal of tzedek, but tzedakah more often is the word used for how we achieve tzedek. And that's how tzedakah migrates into being eventually the money we give the poor in order that there will be tzedek in the world, in society. And you have to take on board for this the assumption that Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to do tzedakah and mishpat, and that without it, society will not be a place of tzedek. That Hashem, there's something called tikkun olam, that Kodesh Baruch Hu is saying to us, I'm setting up things. Hashem does tzedakah and mishpat. God comes down, God loves the stranger to give him lechem v'simla, to give him food and raiment, but he needs us to work at it. It will not happen if we don't work at it as well. I want to remind you that we are at least now present, a small enough group for you to interrupt me, agree, disagree, bring another verse that you think is relevant. You are being welcomed to do that. We are a small enough group to do that. Let me give you some examples. For instance, Amim ha'yikra v'sham yizbachu zivchei tzedek. No, we'll leave that one on the side because that's, I'll stay with the Chumash. We have a phrase, for instance, take a look at Devarim, stay in Devarim, Kaf Hey Tet. Hey Tet, let's see. No, yes, Kaf Hey Tet. No, that's not correct. Okay. Oh, no, a little further. Kaf Hey 12, from verse 12. Lo yelecha bekischa even ve'even gdola ktana. Don't have in your pocket, don't own two different size weights, stones, which are weights. Lo yelecha b'beitcha efa ve'efa, or a measure for volume. Even shleima v'tzedek yelech. You have to have correct weights. They have to be, because you won't do justly if they're not correct, if they're not full. So you weren't allowed to have in your home. There are a number of things you're allowed to have in your home. Very few. You're not allowed to have an idol, and you're not allowed to have a weight that's not correct, because it might get used. In other words, you had this stone, we were using it as a weight. You saw that it got, with time, is a little bit lighter than it should be. It got so much smoothed down. You cannot have that, right? There are very few things that the Torah says you can't have them. You shouldn't use them, you shouldn't do, but not to have them. You can't have an idol in your house, and you can't have a weight that's not tzedek, shlema, but tzedek. Shlema is about the physicality of it, and tzedek is about how it's going to be used, yes? So we have these concepts of tzedek, which is something we need to achieve, and the suggestion, which I think is very interesting, is that tzedaka is what we do to achieve tzedek. Tzedek won't be there just because we want it to be there. It's got to be worked at. And tzedaka is what we try to work at to achieve tzedek. Now, let me put the share screen on now. Let's see if it works okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, the big disadvantage with share screen is that I can't make mine smaller. You can make it as big or small as you like, but I'm stuck with it taking up most of my screen, and that means I can only see a few of you. Okay, but those of you I can see, I can enjoy. Okay. Now, I brought up a couple of pieces here, and I'm starting with things that we know very well, and on purpose, because I think it's very important sometimes to take a text we know well, and use it. And then I want to move to a couple of texts that you may not know as well, or may not have seen. Okay, so I want to start with number 2 here. Shimon HaTzadik hayam mishiarei Knesset HaGdolah. Shimon HaTzadik was Simon the Righteous, one of the last men of the Great Assembly. So we're talking about early Second Temple period time, or mid. Hu haya omer, he used to say, al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omeid. On 3 things the world stands. And when he says the olam, I think he means society, as well as the world altogether. Because the perception is that if human society does not do what it needs to do, then in a sense, at least this part of the world that we know of is here in order to create this kind of society. And if we don't do so, in a sense, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, what is it doing here? So what are the 3 things? Torah, al ha'avodah, which is temple service or maybe prayer today, va'al gmilut chasadim, and on acts of loving kindness. In other words, those are the pillars of society, of what the world needs in order for society to function. Torah, avodah, and gmilut chasadim. Would anybody like to suggest what these 3 things might be? What does Torah mean in this context? What does avodah mean? And what does gmilut chasadim? And how does the world stand? How are these the pillars of the world? Anybody want to suggest? Anybody want to have an idea of why these things would be the pillars of the world? Why does he think so? So, I think, no, I'm not going to talk without any of you talking. Come on. Why does he think? What does it mean?
What we do, like as Jews, they're everything that we.
Yes, sorry, my internet stopped for a moment. I'm still for a moment.
It's not just you, she's frozen.
Oh, she's frozen. Okay.
Elise, you want to say something and then afterwards will come on?
Yes, no, I wanted to say maybe al-hatorah is the learning, al-avodah is like more like doing the things, like we have both things like learn and do, and the gemilut chasadim is what makes also the bond between both of them.
Mhm. I think avodah tends to be the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's more mitzvot bein adam lamakom. Yes, that's serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu in whether it's prayer or whether it's Shabbat or whether it's those kind of things. And Gemilut Chasadim has to do with what we create between us, and it stands on those things. And in other words, Gemilut Chasadim is not just an extra in this vision. Just like Torah, which is the learning, the understanding of it, trying to see it as a whole, and Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim is part of what Hashem wants it all to stand on. You know, there's a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there's a relationship with others, and these relationships are what the world stands on. It's for that it's another way maybe of saying that that's what we created for, to try to achieve these things. But I think it's also a way of saying is that's what makes a society that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Some combination. Caroline, are you all okay there? Are you back?
I'm
Yes.
back. Bye.
Yes, good. Did you want to say something before we move on to the next source?
No, I just, when you asked why these things are three pillars, I don't know. I just figured that it just seems obvious that's what we do as Jews. So
Right.
if we have any mission here, it's
right. But I think what he's doing is taking what seems obvious to us, what we do as Jews, and saying that actually is the support of the world. He's taking it one step forward and saying that these actually create some kind of something that holds the world up or holds up society, right? And it's interesting. Now, I want to go up now to a little piece which I really love, because it's so typically Jewish in that about something really basic we can say have such a difference of opinion. So, okay, this is in Perkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. Arba Midot Ba'adam, and it's a chapter where they're into numbers, 10, 4, you name it, 3. And here we're at 4, and it says there are 4 qualities about people. And I'm starting with the second line, not with the first. Sheli shelcha v'shelcha sheli am haaretz. Sheli shelcha v'shelcha shelcha chasid. Sheli sheli v'shelcha sheli rasha. Okay, I want to start with the last one. What is mine, and what is yours is mine. That's a wicked person. Okay, I think we can all agree. A person who says it's all mine, yours is mine, mine's mine, that's wrong. Okay, and that leads to terrible things. I'm going backwards. Next line up. Sheli shelcha v'shelcha shelcha chasid. We're not being asked every person to be like that, because to say what's mine is mine and what's mine, what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours, but also what's mine is yours, is a tremendously high, level of being. Yes, to say, and we're not being asked, but that's a chassid. The English here says pious person. The Hebrew says chassid. Don't think of chassidim of nowadays. It's a different kind of chassid. These were people who were considered really very specially, a pious person. But today, pious, we usually think of just bein adam lamakom. And here it's bein adam lachavero. It's not. We think usually today of pious, he's very frum. And here pious means in both your mitzvot, like your ritual mitzvot, and your way you're being with other people. Okay. Then it says the one here, here's socialism or communism. Mine is yours and yours is mine, i.e., this is not working, private property, capitalism. We're giving up on that and we're going to say it's all chaos. Mine is yours and yours is mine, okay? And Chazal are not happy with that. And they say, Amaretz. No, that's an uneducated response to it. It doesn't work. And this is something we've seen a lot in the 20th century and into the beginning of the 21st century, that the attempt to say we will solve society's ills by saying, okay, it's all communally owned. It is not necessarily effective or correct. No. And then they come to, all right, here we go, capitalism. laissez-faire capitalism. Sheli, sheli, v'shalcha, shelcha. Okay? What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. Okay? What do you think about that?
There is missing the chesed here.
There's
Maybe
missing
not.
chesed. Okay? But of the four, we've got to choose one. What are we going to ask people to do? We say, to say what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine is clearly wrong. To say what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours and also what mine is yours, that's magnificent, but you have to be a chassid. Not everybody's going to do that. To say what's yours is mine, what's mine is yours, will all is not, seems like a great idea, but no. Either because it doesn't work, or because it doesn't make sense, or because they felt, no, a person has a right to private property, to earn something, to make it yours, right? No. So we got, what are we left with? What's mine is mine and yours is yours. What else have we got? And says, well, yeah, okay, but at least says, but there's no chesed then. So what are we going to suggest to people that should be the midah? So here they come up with the most amazing idea. Here we go, back to the share screen. Sorry that it's such a bother back and forth. It doesn't seem to automatically go back in and out. Sheli shelcha v'shelcha, sheli sheli v'shelcha shelcha. Zo midah binonit. Okay, that's an average guy. All right, that's okay. And then look what we've got. The opposite of what we saw in V'shamu derech Hashem lasot tzedaka mishpat, yesh omrim zo midat sdom. And there are those who say, some say, that is a Sodom type character. Now, how can they say about the same character type, zo midah benonit? That's a commonplace type. It's okay. Or, no, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe that's Sodom. Some people say that's Sodom. Look at the gap between them. And remember where we started? Shamu derech Hashem la'asot tzedaka u'mishpat. That's not what's going on in Sodom. And here I come to another thing in terms of our sharing our ideas. What is sodomy in English? It comes from Sodom. But what is it in English? It's a sexual misdemeanor. I'm not even going to call it, right? It's a sexual misbehavior. What is midat Sodom in Hebrew? Not Maaseh Sodom, because in modern Hebrew, we copied the English for but midat Sodom in Chazal. What is midat Sodom? What is the midah of Sodom?
It's just sticking to the rules, but doing nothing more than that.
Sticking to the rules and not helping somebody when it doesn't affect you. In other words, you have an apartment building and one poor person wants to make a, I don't know, his apartment is on the ground floor and he wants to make an entrance into his apartment because it's hard for him to climb the steps. So he wants to go through the garden, which is a communal garden, and come into his doorway there, right? It will not bother anybody else, maybe one day of noise to make the doorway. I'm purposely choosing something that doesn't really disturb. It will not disturb anybody else in the building. I'm giving this example because it happened to a friend who had to move house because she was not allowed by the people in her building to make an entranceway, though she lived on the ground floor, from the communal garden. It would have disturbed none of them, and it would have given her the ability to enter and go out of her apartment without difficulty. I mean, if she'd gone to court, she would have won, but she didn't want to start doing that. That's midat Sodom. The other people in the building who did not say, yes, of course, you can make that doorway, or I actually don't, but we won't get anything. I'm not getting anything, so you can't get anything. Yes? That's midat Sodom. Not to help another when it's no skin off your back, when you lose nothing, right? We're not talking tzedaka in the sense that you're giving something that you no longer have. We're talking about not giving to somebody. And the halacha is kofin al midat Sodom. You can go to court and you can, in a Jewish court, insist and win if it's a case of midat Sodom. Okay? In other words, what we got out of that story was, what was the terrible behavior of the people in Sodom? That they didn't want him to have guests. Right? And that's what midat Sodom means, as against the Christian vision of that story, which was, what was the terrible behavior? The sexual misdemeanor. I'm not saying we approve of the sexual misdemeanor or that they approve of the not, you shouldn't have guessed. But the main vision of that story in our tradition is midat sdom. Okay, today there is a Hebrew equivalent of the word sodomy with the word Sodom, but that's because we've translated it from outside. Okay, so again, the idea is here of some kind of tzedek that there should be, and if you won't help to that when it's nothing off you, you don't lose out. That's midat sdom. That's already something terrible. So suddenly we have sheli sheli shalach shalach. Well, it's a midah beinonit, but look where it can take us. It can take us very easily to, well, I don't have to help you out. Sort it out yourself, mate. Yes, it's not my problem. It can lead us to laissez-faire capitalism at its most how should we say, most fundamental, most kitzoni, most, how do you say kitzoni in English, somebody? What? What? Extreme. To an extreme form of laissez-faire. Thank you very much. So it's most extreme form of laissez-faire capitalism, where I don't have to help anybody, right? So we're taking from that story, which is, we're sharing that story with lots of people, and we're taking from that story midat sdom, and that's something we have to give. That story is not only about the attack; it's also about the basic value that created that attack. Yes, what brings it on? Today, with the whole problem of immigrants and migrants, it's a major issue. Where does it become midat sdom, and where it's not even about tzedaka, it's about midat sdom, and it's part again of this whole vision, which is, why do I have to give tzedakah? I might love the person. There might have been an advertisement which made me feel so terrible for that little child who was suffering. But I have to give tzedakah whether there's a good advertisement or not, because I have to care that there's tzedek in the world. And the way that there will be tzedek in society is, part of that way is via tzedakah. Because some people will do better and some people will do less well, and there will be a tornado in one place and not in another place. In other words, what's creating the demand for what we call in English charity is tzedek. Tzedek is creating the demand for tzedakah, and what we do tzedakah is partly to do just things, but it's partly that we help people out so that there will be a just picture at the end of it. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not promising that without our work, there will be a just picture in society. He's not promising that everybody will get enough food if we don't make an effort. He's not. Why not? I don't know. But that's how he created human beings, with that possibility that sometimes if there's a tornado in this place, we have to get food there. And there will not be tzedek unless we do tzedakah. And it's very nice if we feel sorry and emotionally feel love for that little child with a beautiful picture in the advertisement, but we have to give it whether or not we felt that, right? And that's, I think, one of the things that we have to share. And that's why I'm bringing this as, when I think of us in the world, one of the things we have to share is that idea of tzedek and tzedakah. Now, the other thing that we have to share about it is something that's in deep need at the moment, which is the acceptance that ethics is complex. Look at the difficulty of this answer. This is a midat beinonit, but we want to put on record that some people say it's a midat sdom. In other words, this attitude is both. It has aspects of both. It could be okay in one moment, because we're not asking anybody to always be a pious person. That's a goal, but we're not saying everybody will do that. We'll really be able to feel that. I do know people who feel that, who have no ayin sarah, they have no narrowness of vision. I'm not saying they give everything that they have, but they feel about it. And here also, I want to maybe talk about two forms of tzedakah that appear in Chumash. Sometimes the tzedakah is yours, and sometimes it isn't. Before you give it, I'm talking about. So, for instance, pe'ah, the corner of your field. You have to leave that when? When? At the end of the harvest. Why at the end of the harvest? Why not leave the corner? Zrizin makdimin the mitzvot. Let's do a mitzvah right away. I have to leave a corner of my field and not harvest it. Well, let's leave it right at the beginning. I'll do the mitzvah right away. Why not?
So you're not supposed to look after yourself before you give charity. That might be a very Christian.
Yes, but look what we're doing. So you mean so you should harvest first for yourself? Okay, but it only takes 2 minutes to leave the corner. Why not start with, I mean, that's a very nice answer. That might be one of the answers. So one of the answers that's given in the Gemara is, because we want everybody to see that you're harvesting so that any poor person can come, and it's not just your cousin who's poor, who knows about it, who's going to come and get it. I.e., this tzedakah you're giving isn't really yours. Okay? And among the different forms of tzedakah in the Chumash, some of them are yours to choose who to give them to, and some of them are not. There's a mixture. Some are and some aren't. So there's a statement that to a certain extent the tzedakah you give wasn't yours in the first place. Yes? And you can't make decisions about it. And some tzedakah you can, and some you can't. And today in modern times, we have the same thing. If there's tremendous needs out there, it's not for you to decide. But if there's smaller needs, after that, you might say, I want to give more to this person. But, if there are people starving in your town, you have to work towards that. You haven't got a choice. So there's some tzedakah today where we see you as the balabayit of your tzedakah, and some tzedakah where we don't see, where you don't have those rights. Now, here I want to give put on another piece. I want to put on another 2 pieces about tzedakah, which show this issue, these issues, which is how do we relate to the tzedakah we're giving, and which also show the issue of complexity. That if you want to be ethical, you've got to get beyond being simplistic. And I think that's one of the great problems that I'm experiencing in modern society today. People want to talk in slogans, and they want it to be simple. Black and white, you're right or I'm right. Right? And that's what was playing out all night, of course, in the United States. Whereas another thing that we as Jews, as people of the book, which is an awful lot of books, it's not just it's the Chumash, plus Mishnah, plus the way we understand Torah Shabbat Peh, plus Midrash, plus Gemara, is that it's complex. And people have difficulty with this. They struggle with this. And I think it's really one of the great contributions that we have as Jews. It's hard. It's much simpler and pleasanter if ethics could be really simple. And ethics isn't. Sometimes it is. So the 10 Commandments doesn't start talking about lo tirtzach, not murder. It has a long paragraph about Shabbat. But in the 10 Commandments, it wants to say to you, lo tirtzach, it's out. Lo tignov, lo tinaf. Certain things are out. But when it comes to discussing it, oh, wait a minute. There's manslaughter. There's arei miklat, cities of refuge. There's when you did it on purpose by mistake. You loved the person before, you hated the person before. There's a lot of complexity. There's rodef, if somebody was running after somebody to kill them. And you don't really understand lo tirtzach, do not murder, if you don't also understand when you might have to kill somebody because he's trying to hurt somebody else, kill somebody else, or rape them, right? So there's a lot of complexity. And I think one of the things that we have as a culture to share is slow down, it's complex. Like that little piece in Pirkei Avot, in a sense, won't give you an answer. You're going to have to work on something. And that if you want to be an ethical person, you can't get all the answers today and then have them for the rest of your life. Every new situation, every change as you as a person is going to demand more thinking about it and more learning. And that's the Torah. Torah doesn't mean, like it says, we say in the Birchot Torah, he gave us Torah and we have Noten. We have Natana Torah, that's on Har Sinai, and we have Notena Torah. He's giving it to us all the time. Torah is a sense of working on it all the time. Now, I want to share with you the other 2 pieces. I'm sorry that it takes a second every time, that it doesn't, here. I want to go on and share with you another 2 pieces. How much time have we got? Yes, we have enough. Okay, I think I'll share the last one first. This is a great piece for complexity. Now, Where, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop the share because I have a question to ask. In the Chumash, tzedakah takes the form of what? How do we find tzedakah in the Chumash? We don't find a mitzvah, give tzedakah. What kind of tzedakah do we find?
Well, that would be to be righteous.
Yes, so we have to be righteous. The word tzedakah, that doesn't mean give money to the poor, but what we call today tzedakah, taking care of the poor, how does that appear in the Chumash? What mitzvahs do we have?
Oh, so like leaving that corner of the field.
Excellent. We have a lot of stuff when you're a farmer, leaving the corner of the field, giving tithing, right? We have mitzvahs like that. What other type of way do we have that the Torah insists on to help the poor? A number of times that we don't do so much today. Lending money, lending. I think people did not have enough money always to give big amounts, and they would lend money, gemach, without taking anything. Lending money was a major form of tzedakah. Lending so giving these tithes and whatever, and lending. So the mitzvah of tzedakah, when you think in terms of the Chumash, is mostly there in the agricultural. And so in the Mishnah, where is the mitzvah of giving money to the poor? Where would we find it? The mitzvah is about how much and how should a kihila give its money to the poor. And having a soup kitchen. That we will find at the end of the tractate, Peah, a corner. In Peah, we'll find all the mitzvahs of giving money to the poor, including at the end of Peah, a whole discussion that you have a tamchui, you have a soup kitchen, and where you give out food, and you have also money that you give out food for the whole week, two meals a day. And in a fascinating way, we find that money for food for that day was for everybody, including people who passed by in the town, including migrants who were not Jewish. Fascinating. It's for everybody. Tamchui is for everybody, whoever turns up who is hungry. Then they have a kupah to take care, longer-term care of the residents of the town and how do you become a resident and what's considered. But tamchui, having to take care of people to make sure they're not hungry, is for everybody. And you don't check, you give it. And it's for everybody, Jewish and not, who happens into your town. It's a very expensive business. And it's from the time of the Mishnah. And that's found when you, in the end of the tractate of Peah. But when it comes to the Gemara, that gets moved because there's no Gemara no Bavli on Peah. So where are they going to move our thinking about tzedakah now? We started with it in Peah, in the gifts that when you're a farmer you give to the poor, in the individual gifts, and at the end of it we have some discussion about now the people are living in towns. This is what we have to do. But when it comes to the Bavli, where are they going to put it? Where could they put the mitzvah of tzedakah? What are our choices? Give me some choices of where we should put the mitzvah of tzedakah. Now that we don't have any Gemara on Peah, and we want to discuss this soup kitchen and the giving meals and the taking care of people and how much is it and how do we divide it and who has to pay it? Only the rich or everybody? And how many people do we need to give it out and how do the people decide? Where are we going to put all this?
Maybe in the part when they discuss not taking interest from a...
Yeah, that's what I thought in Baba Metzia, but it's not there. And I thought maybe in the Chagim, yes, you have to give to... Where did they put it? You were close. They put it in Baba Batra, in the laws of neighbors and running a town. In other words, they moved it from a concept of the individual taking care of a poor person to the community one of the things the community has to do is, like if you live in a shared, they used to live lots of little houses in a shared courtyard, what you can say, oh, you've got to do this as well. You've got to pay towards this. You've got to pay towards a wall around the town for security. And you've got to pay towards tzedakah to take care of people. And that's where everything about tzedakah, 3/4 of the material about tzedakah and all the beautiful midrashim about tzedakah are to be found there in Baba Batra, which is the tractate about how to get along with my land, my house, your house. And that's where they put tzedakah as part of what builds the community. Taking care of the poor people is part of what builds our community. Right? So that message also, look what happened to tzedakah. It moved from the individual farmer into, and the chagim and all that, into what do we do as neighbors? What are our obligations as neighbors? One of our obligations is we can say we need a wall for security, or we need police, or whatever it is. We can make everybody pay. And another obligation is we need to take care of the poor people who are turning up. We're going to make everybody pay. Okay, and there's a discussion how long you live in the city till you're considered a member of the city, and how much do you pay as a wealthier person and a poorer person. But it's all there in Baba Batra. The concept is tzedakah is part of how we live together, right? It's moved from the individual to how we live together. The Rambam moves it back to Peah, and the Shulchan Aruch moves it back again to Baba Batra. Okay, so it's playing in those two areas. It's there as part of God telling you as a human being, as an individual. Giving tzedakah is part of what you do as a human being. And it's there as a society. What are the problems that we have to solve? Tzedakah is coming from the chiyuv on me, the obligation on me to give. And it's coming from the obligation of my society for the needs. And sometimes when the needs of society are less, I can make more choice in terms of what would I like to do with the money I have to give. And when the needs of society are greater, I'm going to have less personal choice because there are needs out there that are screaming. Okay? So there's going to be a balance between how much even individuality I'm left with in terms of my choices. Now, in modern society, we have taxes. And one of the questions is, if I give tax, has that solved the problem of the needy around me? Or does my kihila still have to do some efforts, how much as an individual? I'm not talking about what I want to give because I have money to give. Maybe I'm supposed to give Maaseh, the 10th. I'm talking about the balance between, never mind what money I have to give. What if I see a problem out there? Is it my responsibility? Or in a 21st century society, is it solved by the fact that I pay taxes? Or should my shul get together and look around and see what it needs to solve in addition? These are lots of questions. But the whole idea that tzedakah is coming from two sides that we got to balance is another thing that I think that's developed very much in our thought that we have to contribute.
Rabbanit Gilla, could we also explain that there's a difference between the ideal of Am Yisrael being in Eretz Yisrael, and then the community factor is really not on each individual. It's more of like the Sanhedrin and the ultimate, since all of Eretz Yisrael is one community, we have to worry about the Levi'im and where, getting the tithes like you were talking about. And then the tzedakah aspect and giving charity is really on the individual and the agriculture. Whereas the minute we moved outside of Eretz Yisrael, which is not the ideal, but it's moving into Galut, and then all we have left is our communities, and we can't start relying on something that we're not in control of in terms of the state and how their welfare or things like that we have no control over. Whereas in Israel, we do have control over the welfare of the state in terms of the Mishnah talking about. And that's why maybe the Rambam moved it back, because he was talking about the time, he was talking about every time where, even when we have a state of our own and sovereignty. Whereas the Shulchan Aruch is saying, okay, we're back in Gilla, so this is how it has to be done for now.
But the Shulchan Aruch is talking about it, is going back to the Gemara, and he's talking about communally, not individually. Because in the times, in many periods of history, Jews had autonomy over that area of their lives, right? They had complete autonomy. They had to give the taxes, but how they organized it was up to them. My problem is, in a modern society, even Baruch Hashem in Eretz Yisrael, can I rely on my taxes that it's taking care of everything? No, I can't, because a big bureaucracy doesn't always manage it. I mean, this is one of the questions. To what extent am I still? I think your suggestion is very interesting in terms of the differences between when we're here as a nation versus when we're outside in Galut. But in actual fact, many times in history, we had a lot of autonomy over the question of tzedakah. And that's why I found it so surprising that the halacha was that we nevertheless had to take care of people who weren't Jewish as well, who were coming in of migrants. If there was a town that was mostly Jewish and we were sorting out tzedakah, we had to take care of them as well by halacha, and we were poor very often. So this is a very interesting phenomenon. In other words, it's acting almost as if, it's not like when we rebuild Jewish society now in Israel, we're starting from scratch because a lot of what needed to stay was continuing. That's what I want to say. Some of the aspects of this communal understanding did actually continue over hundreds of years, even though we were in Galut. We took some of that communal responsibility sense with us. Now, I want to show you two things in the share screen to show you. One is to show you complexity, and this is just a wonderful one. This is similar a little bit to the Pirkei Avot. If you live and you have a communal courtyard, and some of the people want to build a Beit Shar, a little house outside it, and for this Chatzer, they want to build something, a little gatekeeper. They want to have a gatekeeper and a closed gate with a gatekeeper, which is considered generally a good thing. It's safer, right? The residents of a courtyard, kofin, can compel each inhabitant of that courtyard to financially participate in the building of a gatehouse and a door to the jointly owned courtyard, right? Because it's safer and it prevents people looking in and all kinds of things. Then the Gemara says, L'meimar de Beit Shar mal yutahi. If it's something that we can compel other people to do, it must be a good thing to have a gate that we can close to our courtyard. Nobody can look in. We have privacy. We have safety. It's a good thing. And then the Gemara says, V'ha'achu chasida. Here we have a chassid again. Dahavei ragil Eliyahu dahavei mishtei bahadei. There was a chassid whom the prophet Elijah used to come and speak to. He used to come and chat with him. Yes? And when he built a Beit Shar, he stopped coming. He built a gatehouse, and afterwards, Elijah, the prophet, didn't come to spend time with him and talk with him anymore. I.e., it's not good to have a gatehouse. Why not? Why is it not good to have a gate enclosed that you can close and a gatehouse to keep people away? Because who can't get in?
People who need to ask for things.
Yes, people who need to ask for help. Not to mention if a woman's being run after and she can't take. And this is a big question now. She can't come in for safety. It's a big question now, right? When you have gated communities, right? And then the poor person is unheard. You don't know about the poor person. But it might be good to have a gate. It creates security for us. Yes, but Eliyahu doesn't come anymore. Then the Gemara goes on and discusses, you can have the right kind of gate. You can have one that try and make a gate that a poor person could be heard. But the idea, again, yes, it's a fair thing. It's a needed thing in society to make gates. Yes, but watch it. And you're taking care of each other by making a gate. And it's good to have a gate. All told, great. But watch out. Because the poor person can't reach you. You're not reachable anymore. You don't know about it. You can't hear what's going on in the street. You don't even hear that poor person because he can't get there. And the whole question, which kind of gatehouse? Was it inside, outside? What's the problem? Okay, the Gemara is going to discuss it. But the Gemara first brings this stark idea. This chassid, Eliyahu came, and then Eliyahu said, I can't spend time with somebody. It's almost like I can't get in. The poor person can't get in, and neither can I to spend time with this person anymore. So again, complexity, different levels, trying to understand how different values that we're going to have to balance. Yes, sometimes we do have real values on both sides. Absolutely. And yet we're going to have to keep them both in mind all the time. This is again what I'm saying we as a society have to share with outside, very much so. The idea that it's complex and it's hard and we have to keep working at it. And yes, they're different aspirations. They're sometimes working against each other, not together. And we have to work do the best we can. And that sometimes it's going to be a compromise between values, but we've got to keep both values in front of us all the time. Now, just one more that I want to share with you, which is here above. Get this out. Yes. Okay. This I didn't translate, but it's magnificent. It's talking about the person who doesn't want to lend money. And it says, if you don't lend money without taking interest, you don't fit into the world. Everything that God created lends one to the other. And then it goes on and says, day lends to night. How does day lend to night? In the winter, the day is shorter. In the summer, the night is shorter. Tzedaka lends to chesed. Mitzvot lend to Torah and vice versa. You go back and forth with when you're doing more learning, when you're doing more keeping. Bina lends to Chachma and vice versa. I mean, you could spend the day we could spend on this piece of Midrash. One aspect, Bina sometimes has to lend to wisdom, and sometimes wisdom has to lend to more a sense of sharpness in evaluating. There's different times, but human beings don't know how to lend to each other. They don't know how to see each other as really the same, and therefore to lend to each other. They just don't know how to do it. And if you cannot lend, because lending means being aware of that there's an organic whole between us. If you can't lend, it's almost as if you're not a being that's part of the world. And the Medrash goes on to say, you just don't belong here. You don't have space to be. That this is so basic to what it means, not only to be a human being, but to be part of the universe. It means an understanding that you need the other and the other needs you. And this organic sense, not only between us as a community, not only between us as a Jewish community, not between us as human beings, but between what it means to be a creature in the world, and not even a creature, a part of the world that God created, is to understand an organic sense of being before God in an organic way. So, Navid, I want to say, I didn't completely address what you wanted to say sufficiently because I was looking at a different angle. But what I wanted to say from here is that we should look into what we have in our Avodat Hashem, in our service of Kodesh Baruch Hu, and look into what we want to share. And how do you share? By talking about it and by living it. What we feel that we have to share, that we have to give the world, to our own, to give our society, the Eretz Israel, to give the world as a whole, to give our kehilot wherever we are, and to give as what is it meaningful that we have to share. And not to feel we don't have something. We have some very real things that can be shared and that we should be aware of as what we have to share and to listen to the other in where they're coming from. And this dual concept of tzedakah was the one I wanted to take as the example. But that and the sense of complexity are, I think, some of the great things we have to share at this moment with society as a whole. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for helping me to work on it together. And I wish you all good health and lots of great pleasure in learning Torah. All the best.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gilla.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you.
care. All the best.
Thank you, Gilla. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
You have to do
Great to see you. Great to see you, all of you as well.
We have to do end meaning for all in order for it to finish. Just letting you know.
I should do. I
Are
don't.
you host? I'm assuming. you're host.
No. I think she co-hosted me, but I don't see it.
When you do you see leave or
Leave.
end? There's
Only
no end
leave.
meaning
There's
for
no
all?
end meeting. No, it's only leave.
So I'm gonna become host and then I'll end meeting for
Yes,
all.
because I won't be able to do it. And can I get a tape of your lecture?
Yeah, sure, of course. I'm
I'd be
gonna
very grateful.
pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
I'm gonna leave because I don't have the end meeting possibility.